Since cattle were first domesticated, cattlemen and women have been trying to improve their cattle genetics with breeding practices and technology. With time, new processes like selective breeding, artificial insemination, and perhaps the most efficient form of mass reproduction, embryo transfer, were developed. My family has incorporated embryo transfer in our breeding program for the past 5 years and have benefited from the results. Embryo transfer is now more popular than ever and is practiced in virtually every part of the United States. While people in the cattle industry are generally familiar with the process, I would like to inform you about the synchronization, superovulation, the flush, and the transfer, which are the 3 key steps in bovine embryo transfer. The synchronization step requires the most science and accordingly is also where error is likely to occur. Therefore, it is very important to have a detailed schedule during this process and even more important that you stick to it. After deciding the donor cow and the recipient mothers to be used, and the actual synchronization and superovulation takes place. The donor cow and recipients are implanted with a seeder and administered a dose of GnRH. This acts on the pituitary gland, which starts a cascade of hormones that are necessary for reproduction. The cows are now being synchronized to come into estrus at the same time. At this point, the donor cow, the cow to be flushed, is also given a follicle-stimulating hormone twice a day for 4 days. This hormone encourages the cow to produce mass amounts of O-octates 7 days after the seeder was implanted. It is finally removed from all the cows and they are administered a dose of prostaglandin F2 alpha. The females should be in standing heat the following day. When the heat is noticed, only the donor cow is bred. The cow is generally AI'd a series of times to ensure fertilization. The fertilized eggs are allowed to incubate in the cow for roughly 7 days, where they are then flushed out of the female. The ET technician sets up his flush media and inserts a catheter into the donor cow's uterine horn. The media is allowed to flush through the horn while the technician palpates the horn and ovary to release the hopefully fertilized eggs. The flush is drained into the filter dish where the embryos settle to the bottom. The catheter is then placed into the remaining horn and the process is repeated. Once the collection is complete, the embryos are examined under a high-power microscope and then graded as a 1, 2, or 3, 1 being the best. At this point, the embryos can be frozen and stored in a liquid nitrogen tank for later transfer, or they can be transferred fresh into a synchronized recipient cow. When transfer takes place, the recipient cows must be set to receive a 7-day-old embryo, because that is how old the embryo was when it was flushed. Therefore, the embryo is transferred into a cow that is 7 days post-estrus. Once the embryo is transferred, the recipient cow is administered another dose of GnRH, which in turn releases a luteinizing hormone that helps keep the pregnancy. The recipient is then ready to carry the embryo to term and deliver a live calf, provided sound management is practiced throughout the gestation. Embryo transfer is a scientific procedure that can pay dividends to a cow herd. When embryo transfer is done correctly, one cow can produce many offspring per year, rather than just one offspring like a cow would have produced with conventional breeding or artificial insemination. Now that you know a little bit about the synchronization, flushing, and transfer of embryos involved in the embryo transfer, you can share the knowledge with others.